He sat on the edge of a wooden bench in the middle of the park. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of wet grass and flowers that were just starting to bloom. He had a sketch pad on his lap and a pencil in his hand, but he was not really drawing yet. His eyes were following the movements of the people walking past him. He liked to watch how people moved, how they laughed, how they carried themselves. It told him more than words ever could. Across the path, she walked slowly, carrying a small bag on her shoulder. She hummed a soft tune that mingled with the sounds of children playing and birds singing. She noticed the benches and the people sitting on them, but kept her focus forward. The park was busy enough to feel alive, but quiet enough that it did not feel crowded. She liked to take walks here sometimes. It gave her space to think and feel things she could not in her busy apartment. Suddenly, a small dog appeared, running as if it had no care in the world. It was chasing after a butterfly, its tiny legs moving fast, almost stumbling over itself. The dog's sudden appearance startled both of them. He tried to move his sketch pad out of the way, but it was too late. The dog leaped right in front of him, knocking his pencil to the ground. At the same time, she jumped back, laughing softly, reaching for the dog. Trying to catch it before it ran off, they both looked at each other in that brief moment, sharing an awkward smile. It was not a long gaze, just a few seconds, but something in that instant felt strange and new. He handed her the dog's leash, which she had grabbed, and she nodded, thanking him. The dog wagged its tail happily, clearly enjoying the small chaos it had created. He bent down to pick up his pencil and looked at her again. He wanted to say something, maybe a joke, but nothing came out. She noticed the hesitation and smiled again, a soft, gentle smile that did not feel forced. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. He returned the smile as best as he could and looked back down at his sketch pad. The pencil was in his hand now, but he still was not drawing. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere curious and unfamiliar. She adjusted the bag on her shoulder and started to walk again, letting the dog trot beside her. He watched her go for a few moments before returning his gaze to the sketch pad. For some reason, he felt like he had missed something, or maybe he had been given something. It was hard to understand, but it left a mark he could not ignore. The next few days were ordinary, filled with work, errands, and quiet evenings. He would sometimes think about that moment in the park. He would remember the way she laughed, the way her hair moved when she turned her head, the sound of her humming. It was not an obsession, but a soft curiosity that stayed in the corner of his mind. She also thought about the man on the bench. She remembered how still he had been, how careful he seemed with his sketch pad, how his eyes moved from the dog to her in a way that felt gentle and observant. She could not explain why, but the encounter stayed with her longer than she expected. It made her smile at unexpected times, even during a busy day at work. One morning, a week after the first meeting, he returned to the park with his sketch pad. The air was colder now, and the leaves were beginning to turn color. He found the same bench and sat down, hoping to find inspiration for a new drawing. He did not expect to see her, but there was a small part of him that secretly hoped for it, and there she was, walking along the path. The small bag on her shoulder again, the dog running ahead of her. Their eyes met as she approached, and for a moment neither moved. It was as if the world had slowed down, leaving only the two of them in that space. She smiled softly, and he felt his chest tighten with a strange, warm feeling he did not fully understand. She stopped near the bench and bent down to pet her dog. He watched her, noticing the way she moved, how natural and unforced it seemed. He felt an urge to speak, but hesitated. It was hard to know what to say to someone who was still a stranger but already felt familiar in a strange, magical way. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. He asked about the dog, about its name, about how long she had had it. She answered with ease, laughing softly at the dog's small antics. The conversation started small, simple questions, but it flowed naturally. Neither was trying too hard to impress the other. They were just talking, and it felt comfortable. Like two people who had known each other for longer than they actually had. They stayed on the bench for a long time, talking about little things first, and then gradually moving to bigger ideas. She shared her love for music, how she liked to play for children and adults alike, how it made her feel alive. He spoke about his art, how he saw the world through lines and shapes, how it helped him understand things that words could not explain. They did not notice the time passing, lost in their conversation, in the quiet magic of the park at some point. The dog wandered away to sniff at a tree, and they both laughed, a shared sound that felt new and familiar at the same time. He offered her a small sketch he had been working on, a simple drawing of the park and the people in it. She looked at it carefully, noticing the detail and care he had put into it. She smiled again softly and told him it was beautiful. That small exchange felt important, like a bridge between two worlds. It was not a grand gesture or a dramatic moment, just something quiet and sincere. But it left them both feeling something deeper than ordinary friendship. They did not rush, did not push for anything more. But there was an unspoken understanding that this meeting was not by chance. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they realized they had been talking for hours. The shadows grew longer, the air cooler, but neither wanted to leave. Finally, she stood up, stretching and smiling. He helped her gather the dog's leash in her bag. They walked toward the park exit together, still talking, still laughing quietly. It felt easy, natural, like they were supposed to be there together in that moment. When they reached the edge of the park, she paused. She looked at him with a question in her eyes, as if asking if they would meet again. He nodded, a small smile on his face, and she walked away, the dog trotting beside her. He watched her disappear into the distance, feeling a strange emptiness, but also a quiet anticipation. Over the next days, he found himself returning to the park more often, hoping to see her again. Each visit was filled with small moments of hope and curiosity. He noticed small things in the park he had not before, the way the sunlight hit the leaves, the way people moved past him without noticing him. But in the back of his mind, he thought about her. Wondering when their paths would cross again, she also returned to the park when she could. She found herself thinking about him during the day, remembering his quiet voice, the way he noticed small details, the way he listened. It was not love yet, not fully, but it was something rare and new, something that made ordinary days feel brighter. One evening, as the sky turned soft shades of pink and orange, they met again near the same bench. This time, there was no dog to interrupt, no sudden chaos to break the moment. They simply smiled at each other, the familiarity already growing between them. They sat, talked, and laughed, sharing small stories from their week. It felt easy, natural, as if they had known each other for a long time, even though they had only met a few days ago. The park began to empty, and the air cooled further, but they stayed. They noticed the small details around them, the subtle sounds of nature, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant laughter of children. Every moment felt alive, vibrant, magical, in a quiet, simple way. As they finally parted ways that evening, they both carried a small sense of wonder with them. Something had begun, something gentle and unspoken, but already powerful. It was the start of a connection that neither fully understood yet, a bond that had been formed in a single, ordinary place but carried the extraordinary magic of human connection. Neither knew exactly where this path would lead, but both felt that it was worth exploring. The world around them seemed a little brighter, a little more full of possibility. And as they walked back to their separate lives, they carried with them a quiet promise that this was only the beginning. A beginning that had started with a simple glance, a small laugh. In a shared moment in a park where time seemed to pause just for them after that evening in the park, both of them found it hard to forget the quiet magic of their meeting. Life went on in its usual rhythm, but each day seemed a little different. Small things reminded him of her, like the way the sunlight fell across his desk or the sound of a bird singing outside his window. He would catch himself thinking about her smile, how easy it felt to talk to her, how natural her presence was. It was not just attraction, it was curiosity, a gentle pull that made him look forward to the next chance to see her again. She felt the same. During her work and routines, her mind would wander to the park and the quiet hours spent with him. She remembered the way he noticed small details, the way he listened without judgment, the way he seemed to understand things that were hard to explain. She could not explain why, but every memory made her heart feel lighter and her steps feel quicker. It was strange to feel this connection with someone she had only met twice, yet it felt familiar, as if it had been waiting for them both. One morning, he decided to take a different route through the city to reach the park. He wanted to arrive early and maybe catch a quiet moment to draw without interruption. The streets were lively with people walking, vendors calling out to sell their goods, and the faint hum of traffic in the distance. He noticed the small cracks in the pavement, the pattern of sunlight on the buildings, the gentle sway of trees along the sidewalks. His sketchpad was ready, but this time he did not focus on drawing the park or its people. He focused on the feeling of being alive, aware, and perhaps hoping meanwhile. She had planned to spend the morning at the park as well. She brought a small notebook, intending to write music ideas, and perhaps some short songs she had been thinking about. She liked to find quiet corners where she could sit and let the world drift by while she created her melodies. Music always gave her a sense of calm and clarity. As she walked through the park entrance, she noticed the benches, the path, and the familiar spots where sunlight fell just right. She felt a small surge of anticipation, not entirely knowing why. Just feeling that something important might happen. Their paths crossed again near the same bench where they had first truly spoken. This time, there was no dog to break the moment, no sudden chaos. They simply saw each other, a soft recognition in their eyes. He smiled gently, and she returned the smile naturally, feeling a warmth that seemed to spread quietly between them. They did not rush or force conversation. They simply sat, allowing the moment to stretch, noticing the little things around them, the rustle of leaves, the faint sound of water from a nearby fountain, the quiet footsteps of people passing by after a few minutes of silence. He spoke first, asking if she had brought her notebook. She nodded and pulled it from her bag, showing him a few sketches of music notes and words she had written down. He looked at them with genuine interest, asking small questions about how she created her ideas and what inspired her songs. She answered patiently, explaining how melodies sometimes came from emotions she could not express in words, how music had always been a way to tell stories silently. He listened carefully, fascinated by the thoughtfulness in her words in turn. He shared some of his sketches. He had drawn a quiet corner of the park, the sunlight hitting the bench, the paths winding through the trees. His lines were simple, but expressive, capturing the feeling of the space rather than every detail. She studied the drawing closely, noticing how he had seen the world differently, how he had captured moments others might have ignored. She told him it was beautiful, and he felt a small pride mixed with relief at her response. It was not praise he was used to, but it felt real and sincere, not forced or exaggerated. As the morning turned to afternoon, they decided to walk along the park paths together. They talked about small things first. The kind of conversations people have when they are just getting to know someone but feel comfortable already. He asked about her work, how she decided to become a music teacher, what she liked most about helping others learn and grow. She asked him about his art, how he chose what to draw, what he felt when he created. Each answer revealed small pieces of themselves, tiny fragments of personality and thought that built a picture of someone more complex and interesting than either had expected. They discovered shared interests, things neither had expected. Both loved quiet spaces, the sound of nature, the feeling of creating something with their own hands. Both enjoyed observing people, noticing small details that others overlooked. Both valued moments of calm in a busy world. Each discovery made them smile, sometimes quietly, sometimes with soft laughter that mingled with the wind through the trees. These shared pieces of understanding created a quiet bond, something deeper than conversation alone could explain. Ours passed unnoticed. They stopped at a small fountain where children were playing, the water sparkling in the sunlight. They watched for a while, commenting quietly on how the children moved and how free they seemed. Their voices were soft, unhurried, blending with the gentle sounds of the park. It felt easy to be together, as if there were no need for explanations or performances, no pressure to be anything other than themselves. This simplicity was rare, and both felt its value deeply at some point. A group of people walked by, chatting and laughing loudly. The moment reminded them of the contrast between ordinary noise and the quiet connection they were experiencing. She leaned slightly closer, sharing a small observation about a sound she had noticed, and he responded with a smile, noting something he had observed. It was a small interaction, but it reinforced the feeling that they were noticing the world together, that their perspectives aligned in ways that made ordinary moments feel significant. They eventually found a quiet spot under a large tree, shade providing relief from the sun. She sat on the grass, and he took a seat beside her, leaving space, but not distance. They shared stories from their childhoods, little memories that revealed fears, joys, and small lessons learned. She spoke about the first time she had played music in front of an audience, the nervous excitement and the pride that followed. He spoke about a sketch he had worked on for weeks, the frustration when it did not turn out as he imagined, and the satisfaction when it finally captured what he had felt with each story. They listened to each other without interruption or judgment. They asked questions, sometimes out of curiosity, sometimes out of care. The act of listening became part of their connection, a quiet way of understanding one another. Neither was rushing, neither was trying to impress. They were simply present, sharing attention and thought, and that presence created something profound. It was the kind of connection that is rare, fragile, and precious, yet grows stronger with time and care by late afternoon. The sunlight had softened, painting the park with shades of gold and amber. They realized that hours had passed without them noticing, that they had spent nearly the entire day together. Neither wanted to leave, yet both knew they had responsibilities and routines waiting. They stood up slowly, stretching and taking in the last moments of sunlight. She smiled softly, a quiet gratitude for the day, and he returned the smile. Feeling a sense of fulfillment and anticipation for the future before partying, they agreed to meet again. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic promise, just a quiet acknowledgement that they wanted to see each other again, to continue the conversations, to explore the connection that had begun. The simplicity of the agreement made it feel sincere and natural. As she walked away, the sunlight catching her hair, he felt a mixture of longing and excitement. He could not explain it fully, but he knew that something important had started, something that could grow into something much larger over the next few days. They both carried the memory of that day with them. Small moments reminded them of each other, the sound of a bird, a soft breeze, a song playing in a quiet corner. They began to anticipate their next meeting, thinking about what they might share, what small discoveries they might make about one another. The curiosity that had begun in the park was growing, becoming a gentle thread connecting their thoughts and emotions, pulling them closer in a way that felt natural and unforced. When they met again at the park a few days later, the familiarity between them had grown, creating a quiet comfort. Conversations flowed more easily, laughter came more naturally, and silences were not empty but full of understanding. They began to notice even smaller details about each other. The way he tilted his head when thinking, the way she moved her hands when describing something. The small quirks and habits that made them uniquely themselves. Each observation was a small layer of connection. Deepening the bond between them, the day passed slowly, filled with quiet magic. They walked along the paths, shared small snacks, watched birds, and commented on the soft changes in the environment. Every small interaction felt meaningful, like a brushstroke adding to a larger picture that neither could fully see yet. By evening, the park seemed to glow with a gentle energy, the kind that makes ordinary places feel extraordinary when shared with someone who understands. As they parted that evening, there was no sadness, only a quiet anticipation. Both knew that the connection they were forming was rare, delicate, and valuable. It was not a whirlwind romance, not a sudden, overpowering passion. It was something gentler, slower, and more profound, built on understanding, shared moments, and the quiet joy of discovering another person. Each walked away carrying a sense of wonder, a soft excitement for what the future might hold, and the memory of a day that felt like it had stretched just for them. Days passed, and their meetings at the park became more frequent. Each encounter carried a sense of anticipation that neither could ignore. It was no longer about chance or coincidence. It was about choice. Both chose to be there, to spend hours together in quiet conversation and gentle laughter. They found themselves arriving early, sometimes bringing small things to share. She brought a few pages of music she had written, and he brought sketches of corners of the park or people he had noticed. It was not about impressing each other, but about sharing pieces of themselves. One afternoon, the sky was painted in soft shades of gray, hinting at rain. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of wet earth from a morning shower. They walked along the familiar paths, the park feeling almost private, though people still moved around them. The quiet energy of their connection seemed stronger in these moments. In the subtle exchange of glances, the ease of shared silence, and the comfort of knowing someone would be there to notice small things about you, she stopped near a small pond, where the water reflected the sky and the trees around it. Ducks floated lazily, their gentle movements rippling the surface. She crouched down, her reflection mingling with the water, and he watched from a few steps away. She smiled softly, noticing the reflection of him in the water as well. It was a simple moment, nothing dramatic, yet it held a quiet intimacy. He moved closer and knelt beside her, not touching, just close enough that their shoulders brushed lightly. They both felt a warmth in that proximity, a soft acknowledgement that something meaningful was unfolding conversation. That day moved naturally from small things to deeper thoughts. She spoke about dreams she had carried since childhood, small ambitions that had felt too fragile to share with anyone else. He listened carefully, asking gentle questions that encouraged her to explore the thoughts she had often kept to herself. He shared stories of his own past, moments of vulnerability he had rarely voiced. There was no rush to define their feelings or understand them fully. They simply shared, layer by layer. Trusting the slow unfolding of connection, the rain began lightly, soft drops falling on leaves and paths. They did not rush to leave. Instead, they found shelter under a large tree, watching as the park transformed in the rain. The sound of water hitting the leaves and puddles created a rhythm, almost musical, that they both noticed. She hummed softly, a tune that matched the rain, and he listened, captivated by the gentle sound. He began to sketch again, not the scenery, but the feeling of the moment. The quiet magic that surrounded them as the rain continued. They walked slowly along the paths, sharing small umbrellas and laughing quietly when one dropped water on their hands. The simplicity of the moment made it feel extraordinary. It was not about adventure or excitement, but about noticing each other, about feeling seen and understood. Each small gesture, hand brushing against hand, a shared look, a quiet laugh, added to the invisible thread connecting them. They both realized that these moments were becoming essential, not just enjoyable in the weeks that followed. They began to explore the city beyond the park. They discovered a small cafe tucked between buildings, a quiet place with warm lighting and soft music. It became a new space for their conversations, a place where they could sit for hours, unnoticed by the busy world outside. They shared coffee and pastries, talking about books they loved, movies they had watched, and memories that had shaped them. Each story revealed a little more, painting a picture of who they were, who they had been, and who they hoped to be. She noticed the way he observed small details, the way he listened intently and remembered what she said. He noticed the warmth in her laughter, the gentle way she described the world, the softness in her voice when speaking about things she cared about. These observations were not superficial. They were rooted in genuine attention and interest. It created a sense of safety, a feeling that each could be entirely themselves, without fear of judgment or misunderstanding. One evening, as they left the cafe, the city lights reflected on wet streets from a passing drizzle. They walked slowly, their steps matching, sometimes talking, sometimes silent. She reached for her bag and found a small notebook inside, with a sketch he had left earlier, something he had drawn after their last meeting in the park. It was a simple drawing, but it captured the essence of a moment they had shared. She looked at it, a quiet smile forming, and he noticed her expression without her needing to say a word. That was enough to deepen the bond. Their connection grew, not only through conversations and shared spaces, but also through small, unspoken understanding. They began to anticipate each other's thoughts, finishing sentences, noticing moods, offering comfort before words were needed. If one was tired, the other would adjust the pace of their day. If one seemed anxious, the other would offer a gentle reassurance. The care was subtle, not dramatic, but it was consistent. This consistency, more than any grand gesture, made the connection feel real and enduring. They also discovered joy in small adventures. A morning spent exploring a quiet art gallery, an afternoon walking along streets lined with trees, a late evening sitting on a park bench watching the stars emerge. Each experience was ordinary in isolation, yet extraordinary when shared. They learned to appreciate simplicity, the kind of moments often overlooked, and found beauty in being present together. The city, which could have felt impersonal and busy, now seemed like a canvas on which they painted their shared experiences. She began to write music inspired by these moments, melodies that captured the calm, the joy, and the gentle excitement of connection. He sometimes watched, fascinated, as her fingers moved over the notebook, translating feelings into symbols and notes. He shared sketches that tried to capture fleeting moments, the tilt of her head, the light in her eyes, quiet energy between them. Each creation became a record of their shared days, a silent testimony to the bond growing quietly but steadily over time. Small challenges arose, as they always do in life. A sudden cold, a missed meeting, a day when work pulled them away. They faced these moments with patience, understanding, and care. They did not need dramatic promises. They simply continued to notice each other, to reach out, to adjust, and adapt. The challenges were not ignored, but they did not diminish the connection. Instead, they reinforced it, proving that the bond was not based only on perfect days but on consistent attention, empathy, and shared presence. One evening, they sat on the grass in the park, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky turned soft shades of orange and purple, reflecting in the small puddles left from a passing shower. She leaned back on her hands, looking up at the clouds, and he lay down beside her, not touching, but close enough to share the moment. They did not speak for a long time, simply breathing, noticing the colors, the sounds, the gentle rustle of leaves. In that silence, there was understanding, a mutual recognition of something rare and fragile, but growing as night fell. City lights began to twinkle, mirroring the stars above. They stood up slowly, stretching and brushing off grass. They walked toward the park exit, their steps quiet but in sync. She paused at the edge, glancing back at him, and he nodded gently. The glance said everything they did not yet put into words. There was care, trust, anticipation, and an unspoken promise to continue exploring what was unfolding between them. The following weeks were filled with similar days. Each meeting carried the same sense of discovery and quiet excitement. They explored new corners of the city, shared meals at small eateries, watched street performers, and found beauty in the ordinary. They learned to notice each other in ways that went beyond words. Through small gestures, shared laughter, and attentive presence, their bond became more than companionship. It became a steady presence, a quiet thread of connection that strengthened with each shared experience. They also began to talk about hopes for the future. Not in grand, dramatic ways, but gently, casually, and honestly. She spoke about dreams she wanted to pursue in music, things she had never told anyone before. He spoke about projects he wanted to explore in his art, ideas he had long held but never shared. These conversations were not demands or obligations. They were ways to understand each other, to include one another in their thoughts and plans. The trust between them grew, rooted in authenticity and care through these experiences. They realized that what they shared was unusual. It was not just attraction or companionship. It was a sense of understanding and support that made ordinary moments extraordinary. They noticed each other in ways others did not, offered comfort without being asked, and celebrated small joys together. The bond was gentle but persistent, growing in quiet, consistent ways that neither could ignore. It was a connection that promised depth and meaning, something that could endure beyond casual meetings or fleeting encounters. One evening, as they parted ways after a long walk, she stopped to look at him with a soft expression. He returned the look, understanding without words. They both felt the weight of what was growing, not in a dramatic, overwhelming way, but in a steady, undeniable sense of importance. Each step away from each other was filled with anticipation for the next meeting, the next conversation, the next shared moment. There was a quiet certainty that this connection was building toward something significant. Something rare, something worth nurturing. Days turned into weeks, and their meetings continued, each one deepening the sense of familiarity and trust. They began to notice even subtler things about each other, small habits, slight changes in mood, preferences in conversation, and ways of expressing thought. They adapted to each other naturally, learning to give space when needed, to offer comfort when necessary, to share joy whenever possible. The connection was alive, dynamic, and growing, a living thread that wove their days together. By the end of the season, the park had changed with the colors of nature. The leaves were warmer in tone, the air carried a hint of chill, and the sunlight shifted to softer angles. They walked together along the familiar paths, noticing these changes, appreciating the transformation as part of the shared world they were exploring. In those walks, in the shared attention to small details, the bond between them felt unshakable. It was not loud or flashy, but it was strong and enduring, built on shared presence care. And understanding the days had grown shorter and the evenings cooler, yet they still found ways to spend time together. Their meetings were no longer just about discovery, but about connection, comfort, and the quiet joy of being with someone who understood without needing explanations. They would sit in the park, walk along familiar streets, or visit small cafes tucked away from the busy city. Every moment carried the same gentle magic. It's a kind that makes ordinary places feel extraordinary. One morning, she received news that made her pause. An opportunity had come up, a new project far away in another city. It was something she had dreamed of, a chance to grow, to explore, to follow a path she had thought might never open. She felt excitement and fear at the same time. The excitement came from the chance to pursue her dreams. The fear came from the thought of leaving him, being apart from the connection that had become so important to her in such a short time. She hesitated before telling him. The days leading up to their next meeting were filled with restless thoughts, imagining how he might react. She worried that he might think she was choosing ambition over connection, that he might pull away, or that their bond might weaken under the weight of distance. Every small scenario played in her mind, making her feel tense and uncertain. She knew that whatever happened next could change everything between them when they finally met at the park. She arrived first, sitting on the familiar bench and watching people pass. He approached, carrying his sketchpad, noticing her unusual stillness. He greeted her with a smile, but she barely returned it, caught in the swirl of thoughts and emotions. She waited until they were seated and the quiet settled before speaking. She told him about the opportunity, about the project, about the possibility of leaving for a while. Her voice was calm but carried a hint of worry. The weight of unspoken fears lingering beneath her words, he listened carefully, letting her speak without interruption. He noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers fidgeted with her bag strap, and the quiet tremor in her voice. He did not react immediately, choosing instead to process what she had said. It was not an easy situation, and he knew it. Yet as he looked at her, he felt the same warmth and connection that had grown between them over weeks of shared moments. He knew that whatever challenge came next, it was not the bond itself that was fragile, but the uncertainty of distance and change. They talked for a long time, walking slowly along the park paths, the air cool and still. She expressed her fears, the worry that the distance might weaken their connection, the thought that time apart could create separation. He spoke honestly about his own feelings, acknowledging that he would miss her, that it would not be easy, but also expressing confidence in the strength of what they had built together. Their conversation was not about convincing or persuading, but about understanding, sharing thoughts, and finding clarity and honesty after hours of discussion. They reached a quiet part of the park, near a small pond where ducks floated calmly. They stopped and sat on the grass, observing the water and the gentle movement of life around them. In that silence, the decision began to feel less daunting. It was not about ignoring the challenge, but about facing it together, acknowledging the fears while holding on to the trust that had grown. They realized that the connection they shared was not limited by proximity. It was rooted in care, understanding, and commitment to support each other through change. They began to make small plans, ways to stay connected despite the distance. Messages, calls, shared photos of places they visited, and small sketches or music notes sent to one another. These gestures, simple and consistent, reinforced the bond, creating a sense of presence even when physically apart. They both discovered that distance did not diminish affection, but highlighted the importance of intention, attention, and small acts of care. Each message or note became a thread connecting their days, keeping them close despite the miles. The day before she was scheduled to leave, they returned to the park once more. The sunlight was soft, filtering through the trees, and the air carried the faint scent of autumn leaves. They walked slowly, taking in the familiar sights, savoring the last hours together before the journey began. Their conversation was gentle, filled with reflections on shared experiences, memories of laughter, and the quiet moments that had shaped their connection. It was a day of presence, a day to honor what they had built, a day to prepare for the next chapter as the evening approached. They found a quiet spot on a bench overlooking the small pond. She reached for her notebook, and he for his sketch pad. And they shared small creation songs, sketches, reflections on their time together. It was a way to capture the essence of their bond, to leave a tangible piece of themselves with one another. The act was simple but meaningful, symbol of continuity and care that would carry them through the period of separation when the time came to part. They walked slowly to the edge of the park, each step heavy with emotion but filled with trust. She looked at him, searching for reassurance, and he offered a quiet, steady gaze that conveyed understanding, support, and commitment. They did not need dramatic words. Their presence, their attention, and the shared understanding of their connection said more than any speech could. They embraced briefly, a gentle touch, a soft moment, a promise to continue despite distance during the weeks apart. They maintained their connection through small, consistent gestures. He sent sketches of places he visited in the city, reflections of moments that reminded him of her. Small drawings capturing beauty in ordinary scenes. She responded with music notes, short recordings, and reflections on her experiences in the new city. Each message, each note, each sketch became a bridge, a way to share presence even when physically apart. They discovered that care, attention, and creativity could sustain a connection as effectively as physical proximity. They also faced challenges. There were days when calls were missed, messages delayed, or schedules conflicted. Moments of doubt or frustration arose, but each time, they returned to the foundation they had built: trust, understanding, and attention to each other's needs. They learned patience, the art of letting space coexist with care, and the importance of consistent small gestures over grand statements. The experience strengthened them, proving that their bond was resilient, adaptable, capable of enduring tests. Months passed, and the initial anxiety of separation softened into a quiet rhythm. Each reunion, brief as it was at first, became a cherished experience, a reminder of the strength and magic of what they shared. They discovered that their connection was not dependent on circumstance, but on intentionality, attention, and shared understanding. They grew individually while remaining connected, learning to balance personal growth with relational care. Each small step reinforced their trust in one another, creating a bond that felt enduring and rare. Finally, the day came when she could return, when distance would no longer be a barrier. The anticipation of the reunion was filled with excitement, nervousness, and hope. When they met again in the park, the familiar bench, the small pond, the softly swaying trees provided the backdrop for a moment that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Their smiles, the gentle warmth in their eyes, and the quiet joy of being together once more spoke louder than any words could. They embraced not as a beginning but as a continuation, a reinforcement of what they had nurtured through distance and care. As they walked through the park together, side by side, they reflected on the lessons learned. They had faced uncertainty, distance, and the fears that come with change, yet their connection had not weakened. Instead, it had grown stronger, deepened by patience, intentionality, and mutual care. They realized that love, in its quiet human form, was not about constant presence, but about unwavering attention, empathy, and the willingness to navigate challenges together. This understanding became a foundation for the next chapter of their story. They spent the day revisiting favorite spots, sharing new stories, and enjoying the comfort of familiar rhythms. Each laugh, each small gesture, each shared observation reinforced the sense of magic that had brought them together in the first place. They understood that what they shared was not simply infatuation, but a deep, enduring bond built through attention, care, and shared experience. It was a love strengthened by challenge, nurtured by presence, and solidified by the choice to remain connected despite obstacles. As evening fell, they returned to the bench overlooking the pond. The sky turned shades of gold and purple, reflecting on the water and mirroring the warmth they felt in each other's presence. They sat quietly, side by side, noticing the subtle details of the moment, the rustle of leaves, the gentle breeze, the reflection of lights on the water. Words were not necessary. Their presence, their shared attention, and the quiet rhythm of breathing together conveyed a profound understanding. The magic was in the simplicity, in the everyday acts that spoke of care and commitment. By the time they left the park that evening, both felt a deep sense of peace. They had navigated challenge, embraced change, and reinforced the strength of their bond. Their connection was no longer fragile or tentative. It had grown resilient, adaptable, and enduring. They walked away with quiet smiles, hands brushing occasionally, hearts full of anticipation for shared moments yet to come. The journey through challenge had not only tested their bond but also revealed its depth. Resilience and quiet magic. The days after her return felt lighter, calmer, and full of quiet joy. They continued to meet in the park, though now it was not only about reconnecting, but also about sharing the fullness of being together. Every meeting carried a subtle sense of magic. It's a kind that is built not through grand gestures, but through simple presence, gentle understanding, and shared attention. They walked along familiar paths, noticing the smallest details, the subtle changes in nature. In the quiet rhythms of city life one morning, they decided to bring a small picnic to the park. They spread a blanket on the grass near the pond, where the water reflected the soft light of early day. The ducks swam lazily, and a gentle breeze moved the leaves above. They had prepared simple food, sandwiches, fruit, and tea, but it was not about the meal. It was about sitting together, sharing the ordinary, while making it feel special, simply because they were together. They talked quietly, laughing softly at small jokes, and noticing each other in ways that felt natural and effortless as they sat there. He reached into his bag and pulled out a sketch pad. She watched as he began to draw, lines moving carefully across the page, capturing something ordinary yet meaningful. She noticed the way his eyes moved, how he observed not just the scene but her, the subtle gestures and expressions that made her unique. She felt seen in a way that was gentle but profound, a quiet acknowledgement of her presence and essence. The sketch was not perfect, but it was real, and it held something more than form. It held care and attention. She responded in kind, taking out her notebook and writing small lines of music inspired by the morning. The notes were simple but melodic, capturing the feeling of warmth, ease, and quiet magic between them. He watched as her fingers moved, fascinated not only by the music, but by the way she expressed herself so naturally and without pretense. Their creativity became a shared language, a way of communicating that went beyond words, reinforcing the connection that had grown stronger with time and care. After a while, they walked slowly along the paths, sharing memories of past days. Reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point, they spoke of small moments that had seemed ordinary at the time but now felt significant. The first encounter with the dog, the quiet conversations under the trees, the days of sketches and music notes shared from a distance. Each recollection was a thread woven into the tapestry of their connection, a reminder that their bond had grown through attention, patience, and understanding rather than dramatic moments or grand declarations. As the day moved toward evening, they found themselves on the familiar bench overlooking the pond. The sunlight reflected softly on the water, turning it into a mirror of gold and amber. They sat quietly, side by side, feeling the warmth of shared presence. She rested her head briefly on his shoulder, and he placed a gentle hand on hers. A quiet gesture of comfort, trust, and belonging. Words were not needed. The quiet of the moment spoke volumes about the depth of understanding and care that had developed between them. They began to plan small adventures together, not out of necessity, but out of desire to explore the world as a pair. Walks to new parts of the city, visits to quiet cafes, evenings under the stars, mornings watching sunlight filter through leaves. Each experience, ordinary on its own, became extraordinary in their shared attention and presence. They discovered joy in simplicity, the kind that grows from noticing, appreciating, and valuing the everyday moments when shared with someone who understands and cares. One evening, they returned to the park after a gentle rain. The paths glistened with moisture, leaves shimmered in the soft light, and the air carried a fresh, earthy scent. They walked slowly, talking softly about hopes, dreams, and small things they noticed about each other. She spoke about music she wanted to explore, melodies she imagined, and moments of inspiration she wished to capture. He shared sketches of places he wanted to draw, ideas for capturing fleeting moments, and thoughts about how he saw the world. Their conversation was not hurried or forced, but flowed naturally. Each word and gesture reinforcing their connection. They found a quiet spot under a large tree and sat together. Observing the reflections in the puddles and the soft movements of leaves in the wind, they shared small silences, comfortable and full of understanding, where presence itself became a form of communication. Each pause, each glance, each soft laugh added depth to the connection, reinforcing the quiet magic that had grown steadily over weeks and months. It was in these moments that they felt the extraordinary nature of their bond, built on care, attention, and shared life rather than grand gestures or dramatic events. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and purple, they walked along the familiar paths toward the exit of the park. Every step was unhurried, every glance shared, every gesture gentle and attentive. They noticed small things: a flower leaning toward the sunlight, a bird perched on a branch, the reflection of light in the water. These small details, observed together, became part of their shared story. The quiet moments that made the bond feel enduring and special. They spoke of the future, not in terms of grand plans, but in small, meaningful ways. Places they wanted to visit together, small routines they hoped to share, creative projects they could support each other in. These conversations were rooted in reality, grounded in the practical aspects of life, yet carried the quiet excitement of possibilities. Each idea, each plan reinforced the understanding that their connection was real, enduring, and worth nurturing. It was not about fantasy, but about building a shared life, one small, intentional step at a time. As night fell, they returned to the bench by the pond, now bathed in the soft glow of city lights reflecting on the water. They sat in quiet contentment, side by side, feeling the weight of the day and the lightness of shared presence. She rested her head lightly against his shoulder, and he held her hand gently, fingers entwining in a gesture of connection, trust, and care. The magic of the day was not in excitement or spectacle, but in the quiet understanding that they belonged together. Even in the simple act of being near each other, they watched as the stars began to appear. Faint at first, then brighter, scattered across the sky. The reflection in the water mirrored the same gentle light, creating a feeling of infinite space, of quiet possibility. They spoke softly about the beauty of the night, the way the world seemed to slow, and the way small moments could carry enormous meaning. In this quiet, they felt the depth of their connection, the bond that had grown through shared time, attention, and care. It was a love that did not demand drama, but offered steady presence and gentle understanding in the weeks that followed. They continued their pattern of shared moments. Mornings in the park, afternoons exploring the city, evenings listening to music, sharing sketches, and quietly observing the world. Each experience built upon the last, deepening trust, understanding, and emotional intimacy. They discovered that love was not only about moments of excitement, but about consistency, patience, and the quiet attention to small, meaningful acts. The ordinary became extraordinary because it was shared, noticed, and valued mutually. They also began to notice changes in themselves. Subtle shifts that reflected growth and reflection, inspired by the connection. She felt more grounded, more confident, and more attuned to her own thoughts and feelings. He noticed a softness in his perspective, a greater appreciation for moments of presence and empathy. These changes were not dramatic but meaningful, woven into the fabric of their daily lives, noticeable in gestures, conversations, and shared attentiveness. Each saw the other's influence as a quiet gift, shaping their own growth without force or pressure. One evening, as autumn leaves fell gently around them, they returned to the park bench where so much of their story had begun. The colors of the leaves mirrored the warmth of their connection, the subtle shifts in light reflecting the depth and complexity of what had grown between them. They sat quietly, holding hands, sharing small observations about the beauty around them, and feeling the comfort of consistent presence. There was no need for words to define what existed. The bond was evident in attention, care, and quiet understanding.